Howdy out there, friends, and thanks again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale, and the man that needs no introduction, and possibly because I didn't have time to try to on-the-fly think one up right now, so I don't really have it in the back of my head. So just the king of male pattern baldness himself, Kyle Filson.
How's it going, everybody? I'm here. I've completed my continuing education. What a weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
Oddly enough, you don't seem much smarter than me.
No, you don't learn anything. You don't learn anything from the continuing education. It's just a way to siphon money out of me. And every 2 years I have to do it. I don't know a single guy that does what I do that enjoys it. And everybody always procrastinates to the end, which is what I did again. And apparently because of Hurricane Harvey, they're backlogged with renewing licenses. Didn't know this, but my buddy called me, Justin. He called me just today and was like, yeah, we may not be getting our license reissued for like a couple weeks. And I'm like, what?
Excuse me?
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
I can't go a couple weeks without working. And, but he called back and he spoke to a different person there and they were like, it'll be a little while, but not what they told you.
Yeah.
So it's probably somebody, at work having a bad day, caught him at the wrong time and they just wanted to be mean and hateful to him. I don't know. Maybe he was being a jerk. I don't know.
Right.
He said he wasn't. I think he was worried like me, but, but anyways, I had to do the continuing education. I got it finished. Man, it feels good to get it over with. Because you have to do like 28 hours. It's not like you take like a 3-hour course. It's 28 hours.
Of sitting there.
In front of a computer. And not only do I not make any money, I have to pay money to do it. And then you have to, once you complete the courses, then you have to pay like another $600 fee just to get the new license. It's not like they send you some fancy magical document. They basically just email you a PDF that says, okay, you're good till 2 more years.
They're like, why don't you just let me pay it? Like, why make me sit through it?
I think the owner of the TALCB has a brother who started this online learning course because that's a brilliant scheme, is to make people take these courses that don't teach you really anything.
Yeah, for sure.
But outside of that, we've had a break from baseball. We haven't had any tournaments in the last 3 weeks. And, of course, with Easter coming up this next week, we won't be having one now. But then I think after that, I've got a baseball tournament 4 or 5 weeks in a row. Yeah. So basically no weekends for me other than sitting outside.
Yeah, mine didn't go so well. Yeah. That was the delay for the show, folks.
You were moonlighting as a plumber this weekend. Is that not correct?
Yeah. I went to my great niece's birthday, like I had spoken on one of the last episodes, on Saturday. Great time. We had a wonderful time. Got to hang out with everybody and all this stuff. And then I get up Sunday, and I'm like, yeah. And I hear a little sound, like I've talked about my hot water heater. But now this thing is starting to leak. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? And now it's dripping out of the bottom. I'm like, well, this isn't good. I've got to definitely do something. So I decided to go play a little disc golf, of course, Sunday afternoon, or actually midday, and played all that. And then I went and got all the stuff and got ready to do it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take off work Monday and do it. It's already late in the day. This won't take any time. I'll be done before lunch and just head on into work about lunch, and it'll be no big deal. I'll just pull it out and be done with it, and that's that. So I get up early Monday morning, and I attach everything to that I'm going to work on and to drain this thing. And while I'm attaching the hose, the drain breaks clean off in my hand and floods me and my house with scalding hot water. 40 gallons to be exact, if you're wondering. Yeah. So then I have to get all that done, and then not paying attention to the way my hot water heater closet was built. It barely has enough room. I mean, like less than ½ inch on either side to get this thing out, this old hot water heater out. Well, the new ones, of course, aren't the same size as the old ones. So guess what won't go in the hot water heater closet?
The new one?
The new hot water heater. So I have to take off all the trim, and then I have to take out the little door jamb, and then I have to remove some fur strips, and I have to widen this door jamb to slide this hot water heater in this little hot water heater closet. My house is an older home built here where we live. So I get all that done. So pretty much it takes me all day. By the time I get all the mess, first of all, get all the water drained out, then get all the mess cleaned up, and get all that. I mean, because that was the game plan, is us to knock out the recording early Monday and then be done with pretty much everything.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, yeah, it was horrible. So, yeah, I spent all day replacing my hot water heater. But, hey, guess what? I got hot water now.
You got hot water now, and we're here to do the podcast.
Ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, let's get into the news. This is an interesting story from a woman who sent it over to Phantoms and Monsters to our buddy Lon Strickler over there. Check this out. This is an odd sighting she had back in 1971. She says, "Hi, Lon. I'm from Waterville, Maine. Back in late summer or early fall of 1971, I was newly married and living in Killeen, Texas, with my husband who was in the Army. We had a small duplex apartment in Killeen. Well, one night he had duty, and I was home alone in bed around 3 a.m. in the morning. I woke up suddenly and saw a black figure standing at the bottom of my bed. It was 8 or 9 feet tall and had huge big black wings and red eyes. I closed my eyes and opened them again, and it had moved even closer to me on the right side of my bed. I couldn't scream. It was as if I was frozen in fear. I covered my head in the blankets. I was so afraid. After about 5 minutes, I looked, and it was gone. It gave me a horrible feeling, and I prayed never to see it again. Shortly after this event, I came back to Maine, as I was way too frightened to ever stay alone at night when he had duty. I told my mom what I had seen about the huge black angel thing that night, and she was glad I came home, as that didn't sound good. I had never heard of the Mothman, but a few years ago I came across an article and a drawing of one. Even before I read the article, I said, "Wow, that is exactly what I saw in my room in Texas." It didn't have a noticeable neck, and its face was like hooded, its wings tucked in on its side, but you could tell they were very large. It was totally black except for the eyes were round, large, and they were red. Lon, I still think of this thing with fear. Personally, do you have any idea what it was? I'm 57 now, and I'm still searching for an answer. So, interesting story. It's much like several of the stories you talked about in this show. This one is not just a shadow being or a hat man. She appears to have seen what looks like this Mothman or a winged creature that they're seeing in and around Chicago, but she saw it in Killeen, Texas at the Army base. So what is this? I don't know. Very terrifying story.
Imagine having that in your bedroom, like waking up and seeing that in your bedroom. Like, it's one thing, you'd be terrified, of course, to see it out flying around like we've discussed, but it's a whole nother thing when it's at the foot of your bed.
Yeah, speaking of
that ain't cool.
Crazy bat-like things flying around. After your story, I've got another pretty interesting story I think you're going to like.
This is something I drew up. It come from MUFON, and I pulled this up just for you. Okay.
For me?
Just for you. This is a Chestnut Ridge reptilian sighting, all right?
Uh-oh, I like reptilians.
Took place in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania, okay? Now, this took place this year. It was actually January 15th of this year, about 2:30 in the morning. But the person that had the sighting had a friend write this in for him, because the person is a little worked up over this whole deal. Now, folks, we cover some pretty wild stuff. But when I tell you this, I know instantly everybody's going to go, this is insane, this person's crazy or whatnot. And I hope it is only just somebody that's having a bad time, might need to get on some meds or was off. I don't know. I'm hoping that this isn't real when I read this to you. It says, I'm writing this for a friend, and he wants an investigation. He wears a bulletproof vest and carries a gun every day because of this encounter. He said that there is 8 feet tall creatures resembling a reptilian-type creature surrounding his house at nights. That they get into his head and communicate strange things like stuff about end of civilization things, and that only a small group of people will survive. Now, he goes on to say that sometimes they get physical, and then he loses consciousness. And they also have been known to mimic his voice, that when he goes into the woods and starts yelling at them, that this creature starts sounding off, and it starts sounding strange, and that they all start repeating whatever he yelled over and over until they get it right and exactly duplicate it. And he said, then this gives him chills and he just freaks out.
Want some candy?
Right. Now, he goes on to say that they are over 8 foot tall. All right.
Uh-huh.
He goes on to say this. He shoots at them, and then a light, mind you, smacks the bullets out of the air. When the light hits the bullets,
What?
It makes a real loud slapping noise. Yeah. So some magical light is knocking bullets out of the air while he's shooting at them. He goes on to say that he finds the bullets in the yard in the mornings. So when they're in his yard and he's popping shots at them, the light knocks it down, and he gets down and goes sees them. He says some of these bullets are perfectly shaped, and others are flat, like they got smashed on a train track, like the old penny trick. He says since guns and bullets don't work, he's even tried using a knife, and he actually stabbed one, and it cried out and yelled. He says that he used a bear trap one time, and then it snapped shut, and he heard this thing screaming, and when he gets up in the morning to check it out, the trap's gone. He goes, there's a lot more to the story. This person writing goes, but I can't remember it all. But this fellow wants an interview, and he wants somebody that will help him.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you call the police?
Right? He goes, they don't seem to be able to come into the house for some reason. And he believes that humans, when I'm not talking about the person that wrote it, I'm talking about the person that experienced it, believes that humans might be working with them also. And at the same time that these incidences were taking place, the author says that this fella's dog got shot, and then he found the dog dead in a box on his front porch with a note that says, "Don't forget." Now, he goes on to say that the author says that the only way that the guy related to him that it seems to be able to kill one of these creatures is to stab it in some sort of conflict. So, like, if you're in a fight and it's trying to drag you off,
shoot it.
That's what he's claiming, that as you go to drag it off, he said, hopefully it'll bleed out while you're in this fight with this thing and stabbing it. Now, he says he knows a lot more, the man he's reporting it for.
Yeah.
And that he just wants these creatures away from his house and out of the woods. He just wants somebody to help him. Now, like I said before, it's a very interesting story. It sounds like the ravings of a lunatic.
What was I going to say? Either the guy is completely insane or he's experiencing something horrible.
One of the most terrifying encounters you could possibly deal with.
I would already... Listen. Listen to this. If anything remotely similar to this happened to me, it wouldn't even have to be more than one night. I'd be like, I'm out of here. The house is up for sale. I'm gone. I'm not going to have a knife fight with a reptilian. Yeah,
an 8-foot tall reptilian. I'm going to get in a gunfight to where this magic light slaps the bullets down, and then I'm going to get into a knife fight with them.
Yeah, that sounds like a horrible
with 8-foot tall slee stacks is what I'm going to knife fight with.
Yeah.
So I brought all this up just to ask you this question, and you just answered it. Several years ago, we covered the story about the dog men that were coming into people's yards.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now we're covering the story about this that's coming into people's yards. My thing is this. Surely there's a video camera somewhere that you can get it on your phone, takes great video. Why are we not getting... Look, I'm not saying that this person that wrote this in, but it is awful funny that it's, a friend of mine experienced it. You know, like always the old joke is, I'm asking for a friend, and all this stuff.
Say a buddy of mine forgot to turn in his algebra homework.
Yeah, right.
Is there any way
might happen?
I could tell him how he could make up the grade?
Yeah.
It wasn't me, though.
Yeah, I'm asking for a buddy. It just seems like I don't want this to be real. I want it to be...
No, you don't want this to be real.
Well, I don't want it to be real for the fella's sake that maybe they can get this fella some help. And also, the idea of these reptilians, like they can't come in the house. Well, why not?
I'm the opposite. I'm gonna retract my last statement. I want this to be real.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I feel sorry for the person involved, but I don't want this to be a fake story. I want it to be a real story.
Well, that's what I mean. I was going to ask you would you try to video it if you were involved? Or would you, like if you fought the first time and they knocked the bullets down, would you be like, okay, pack your things, I'm out?
Yeah.
Or would you be like, how about I film this and then I call the police or the sheriff or the DPS or somebody to get involved?
I smell something cooking on this one because even the person that's writing the story, why wouldn't, if I was experiencing this, I'd be, Cam, you got to come over tonight because about 11:30, when I start firing off my AR-15, you're going to see lights shooting the bullets out of the air.
Now, look, you and I have done a lot together, and I mean a lot. And I don't know if I'd be man enough to come over. If you told me this story, I'd be
you'd be like, oh, I'm there. I got to see
I'm
this.
lying. I would grab some beer and I'd come over. You're right. I'd be like, all right, you got to show me what you got.
Well,
here.
that's what's so funny about the article is like the person so nonchalantly reporting this on behalf of his friend.
Yeah.
But you're not like, you wouldn't be like,
you didn't go see it? Because I'd have to see it.
Yeah, I'd have to be like, look, man, I think Roger's losing it.
As crazy as I think you are, I would still have to come over and check it out for myself.
I'd go home and tell my wife, I'd be like, look, he told me, I mean, this is an incredible story. Lay it out and be like, look, I have to go see this. I just have to.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like a very odd story.
I just wish there was some more video footage of something along those lines. If it's coming to your house and it's that easy, let's film it. Let me see this. I want to get involved.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned before, this is about, we've been talking about the Mothman and the crazy flying bat-winged Jeepers Creepers type creature being seen all over North America recently. This is actually an article from the New York Times. It's from the September 12th, 1880 article, and it's titled An Aerial Mystery. Now, check this out. Of course, the wording is antiquated. It talks, it sounds a lot like they wrote at the time in 1880, so bear with me. But the article says that one day last week, a marvelous apparition was seen near Coney Island. At the height of at least 1,000 feet in the air, a strange object was in the act of flying towards the New Jersey coast. It was apparently a man with bat's wings and improved frog's legs. The face of a man could be distinctly seen, and it wore a cruel and determined expression. The movements made by the object closely resembled those of a frog in the act of swimming with his hind legs and flying with his front legs. Of course, no respectable frog has ever been known to conduct himself in precisely that way, but were a frog to wear bat's wings and to attempt to swim and fly at the same time, that's what it would look like. He would correctly imitate the conduct of the Coney Island monster. When we add that this monster waved its wings in answer to the whistle of a locomotive and was of a deep black color, the alarming nature of the apparition can be imagined. The object was seen by many reputable persons, and they all agree that it was a man engaged in flying towards New Jersey. About a month ago, an object of precisely the same nature was seen in the air over St. Louis by a number of citizens who happened to be sober and are believed to be trustworthy. A little later, it was seen by various Kentucky persons as it flew across the state. In no instance has it been known to alight, and no one has seen it at a lower elevation than 1,000 feet above the surface of the earth. It is without a doubt the most extraordinary and wonderful object that has ever been seen, and there should be no time lost in ascertaining its precise nature, habits, and probable mission. That this aerial apparition is a man fitted with practicable wings, there is no reason to doubt. Someone has solved the problem of aerial navigation by inventing wings with which a man can sustain himself in air and direct his flight to any desired point. Whoever this adventurous flyer and what is his object are questions of immediate and enormous importance. Of course, the first impulse of the unreflecting mind will be to exclaim that the mysterious flyer is an aeronaut who has invented practicable wings and is secretly experimenting with them before making his invention public. This is directly at variance with what is known habits and customs of aeronauts. So what a bizarre article. So there's...
First of all, the way it's written confuses the hell out of me.
Oh, yeah, it's very confusing.
But I like the fact that it's just matter-of-factly, well, that's just what aeronauts do.
Yeah, that's what they do. And this kind
That's how flying goes.
It reminds me of the Sonora Aero Club, where these guys had these dirigibles, they were flying around. So, they're claiming they saw this near Coney Island, a man that he looks like a frog with bat wings. He's flying around. They could see his face. He waved his wings at a locomotive. They saw the same thing a couple months prior to that in St. Louis. And then they saw it flying across the state of Kentucky a couple weeks later. And then, now that we're here in 2018, we know of no such invention ever being made. So what were the people saying?
I personally like to believe the old ideas, like we've all, we've discussed numerous times about how much we love the old steampunk ideas and things like that. I personally like to believe that there were inventors back then that found certain things, and I mean like extreme eccentrics, that figured this out and maybe
I'm with you.
Invented some of this stuff and then realized that it would only be bad for mankind if it fell into the wrong hands. So that's the reason that we don't know of it right now.
I'm with you. I like to think of that too. I love the story of the Aero Sonora Club and these flying machines. I'm with you though. My mind instantly goes to like steampunk. Steampunk. I don't know what that is.
I've also thought too about the Sonora Club when you did that whole segment, and it always makes me wonder that if your father or maybe they weren't even married. Let's say, they didn't even have kids, but maybe they had a nephew or a niece. But if your uncle was one of those people and that, you were real close, say, to your uncle too, that was your mom's only brother or your dad's only brother, and he was a little odd, but you really, you and him really hit it off and all that stuff. It makes me always daydream again about growing up and knowing his secrets, and then you carry it on. It's almost like one of those, always the superheroes, that pass on this stuff. And that's kind of the way I feel. Like maybe a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with, maybe now it's more militarized. Maybe now it's more less breakaway society, less individuals. It's been more because it's not as easy to keep secret now as it once was. But that a lot of this stuff started because of that. Because you have to imagine, let's just take it back to the 20s and 30s, and prior to World War II, like even after World War I and all the time in Germany and the things they were coming up with in the 30s, Well, it was easier to travel over there. If you had money, you could go over there all you wanted to and secretly meet with whoever you wanted to and all this stuff. And in the end, you got to imagine all these crazy inventors getting together and sharing this stuff. And what they're thinking of is larger than the picture of mankind. It's for the world. It's for all of this. And they're not even worried about, people arguing and back and forth. They're just, how they get. They're extremely eccentric. So
yeah. And I always think of, whenever I think of these secret societies or these secret groups of scientists and stuff, I always think of that Friendship Island with the strange people that were seen in town when they come to get groceries and stuff. No one really knew what was going on that island.
Small threads of strange and unusual things happening.
Just enough to seem mysterious, yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the whole topic of strange and unusual small threads, folks, when we get back from the break, I'm going to be touching on some of the strange, I guess you could say, conspiracy surroundings around the death of Miss Marilyn Monroe. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. All right, y'all. And like I had discussed earlier, before the break, I'm going to talk about, I guess you could say, you could call her America's sweetheart. Most people, I mean, if you bring up the name Norma Jean Mortensen, don't really know who you're talking about. And of course, I would be one of those people. You'd have to think about it, a little bit. But it is the name of Miss Marilyn Monroe. That was her given name. And I guess my very first introduction to Miss Monroe would probably be through my wife. She was always, like we said before, and y'all all know that her and I love to go watch movies. And that was always something her and I did a lot of. But it was her that introduced me to a movie called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Now, it was like her mother and always watched, it's one of those type things. But I think the deal that always gets me the most about it is Jane Russell was in this movie with her. And for those of you that don't know, if you just Google search it or pull it up on YouTube, you'll recognize it instantly because of the guys. She's in this real pretty dress and all these dudes are like dressed the same and they got on like red and white ties, all this stuff, the way they're all bouncing around on there. But anyway, I mean, it was a movie that's dated, it's from 1953. So it's not one that holds up, if you will, that goes on this whole deal. But she passed away in 1962, born and raised in LA, right? Which is one of those things back in the day you kind of expected your actress to be. She almost had like the special glow to her already of being born and raised in LA. Like she's doing what she was meant to do. August 5th, actually, folks, is when she'd passed away. She was found dead, of course, in her bedroom there in Brentwood, California, which Brentwood seems to be synonymous with something crazy in Hollywood, deaths, things along those lines. So there was something that always stuck out to everybody, of course, in this whole thing, and it was the fact that it was the LA County coroner ruled her death not a suicide, but a probable suicide, because it was believed that what had actually killed her was a barbiturate poisoning, that she had taken a very lethal dose of these barbiturates. Well, like we know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that revolve around Miss Monroe. It's always rumored about her ties with JFK and that family. It was always rumored about, they said she was mentally ill because of a history of her mother being in a home and all that stuff whenever she gave basically Norma Jean up years and years. And Norma Jean, of course, bounced around to foster homes and bounced around to foster families where bad things, of course, happened to her. But there's always been these theories about how she died and why she died. What did she know? Did she know something? Was she just a sad, depressed woman? I mean, what was she, 36 years old? I mean, she was a beautiful woman, had things going her way. Some could argue the fact that being that it's Hollywood, that maybe with her looks waning, that maybe that's what caused it. Maybe that depressed her. And she decided, you know what? I'm just done. I'm checking out. Maybe she was depressed over failed marriages. Who knows? But there's also a lot of weirdness, strangeness that goes on. I want to touch on some of this stuff about these strange things. And like we've talked about, the Kennedys play a very large role in this. And many to this day believe that they are solely responsible for her death. Now, in 1985, there was a book released called The Secret Lives of Marilyn Monroe. And in this book was written by Anthony Summers. Now, Anthony Summers, we're going to have to preface that, was a tabloid journalist. That's right. You heard me right, folks. But like the tabloids, which seemed to be a little different than what they were when I was a kid. Of course, they were in every grocery store and every little stop you could make. They were just racks of them by the doors when you got ready to leave or when you were checking out. And I remember the craziest, I look back now, I wished I would have collected some of those tabloid papers, because they had some of the greatest, like I gave birth to an alien, all of these crazy things. So I wished I'd have kept some now just to frame and keep. But anyway, Summers was a writer for these tabloids, and he claimed that Robert Kennedy and their brother-in-law, his brother-in-law, Robert's brother-in-law, Mr. Peter Lawford, actually had encouraged Marilyn to do the drugs and the alcohol and all this, all of her youth, the use on all this stuff, because they say that she had threatened to go public with her affair with Robert. And that according to the book, and according to Summers, that this was an accidental overdose and that she actually died on the way to the hospital, and that they staged this whole death as a suicide. And then in the book, of course, it goes on, he talks about that the director, the FBI director at the time of her death, just so happened to be J. Edgar Hoover, and that it's a theory that Hoover helped the Kennedys hide a bunch of this and cover a bunch of this stuff up, right? Now, some of this has even been talked about by Eunice Murray. Now, Eunice Murray was Marilyn Monroe's personal housekeeper, and she's been interviewed numerous times. And I mean, all the way back, we're talking like early 80s, that it claims, that she had confirmed some of this. And in the book, of course, it says that Summers even reports that at one point after an interview with Eunice, that she said that the words, to the effect of like, why do I have to keep covering this up, and all this stuff. And that Bobby Kennedy was there. And of course, about the affair with Bobby, like she had kind of led it to believe that she knew more about the death. But that's always hearsay. You're sitting at the table, I'm interviewing you, you tell me what, I come out and all you got to do is say, I didn't say that. Well, then it's all gone. Two people were the only ones there. Maybe it wasn't recorded. You have no idea. Then you hear another one. There's another book that came out, of course, and you start thinking about, I always think back to Prince or Michael Jackson or any of these, because there's another book that popped out, written by a fellow named David Spotto. And David talks about the fact that it's the doctor's fault, that they was an accidental overdose about her medication, rather. And that's what actually had killed her. And his book had come out in 93, and it goes on. He talks about statements that were given by the police reports, and goes on to the fact that people had claimed that she was getting a new movie deal and that she was actually going to remarry Mr. Joe DiMaggio. So some of this stuff, who knows, right? That nobody really says on this whole thing. Now, a very interesting one was a biographer named Darwin Porter. Now, Darwin's book was called Maryland at Rainbow's End. Now, the neat thing about this book, and I've not read these books, I've researched them, looked into these books, but I've researched some of these topics of what they're getting into, and you use that to be like, ooh, now I'm definitely going to, in fact, by the time you're hearing this, the book's already been ordered. I'm ordering Darwin's book because it is based on the fact that the mafia actually killed Miss Monroe, and that it was given from orders from the Kennedys. Now they claim that, or he claims in the book, that a mob boss received some orders from one of the Kennedy brothers, basically saying, hey, look, she's going to go public about this affair. We can't have this. You're in our pocket. You have to do what you have to do for us. And the story goes on that five mafioso hitmen showed up at Marilyn's house and basically chloroformed her, right? And then injected her with barbiturates and then put her on the bed and made it, basically stage it to look like a suicide. So I'm guessing, if you're not knowing to look in the 60s for a needle mark or anything like that, you don't really know. Or maybe you were even told to, y'all are going along with this, we're just going to cover it as best we can. Then that's something. And that's something, like I said, I'm going to read more on that. That really sounds more along the lines of something that I could personally get behind, like, maybe she was knocked off by the Kennedys. Of course, they didn't personally do it. Like you can't, I personally can't picture a president going and doing it himself whenever he has enough cronies to go do it for him.
But my favorite of all of these conspiracy theories surrounding her death involves UFOs. And that's what I'm going to touch on. And I love this. I mean, this is something, look, it may be nothing and it may be 100% the truth, but it is, like we always talk about, the little threads, folks. Like when you're trying to get little threads and you want to sew them together to make something, it takes a bunch of little threads to really build a good mat, a good foundation. And that kind of feels like this. In 1995, a fellow named Milo Spirigolo, basically, he had a press conference, okay? Now, Milo's passed on to the next plane. So Milo has actually written 3 books about Marilyn Monroe's death. He wrote a book called, The Marilyn Conspiracy, Marilyn Monroe, The Murder Cover-Up, and then Crypt 33, The Saga of Marilyn Monroe. And in these books, he talks about this document. And this document he's referring to came to light from Timothy Cooper. And this document goes on to say that JFK, basically it states that he told her, Marilyn, about some of the goings on that involved Roswell in 1947 in, little bedroom talk, little pillow talk. And that's what went down. And then, of course, goes on that as a result of this, that the CIA found out. And one thing led to another, and you know how that goes. But at this press conference, Mario actually was quoted saying that I had the document probably about 2 months before I even did anything with it. And he said, I looked at it and I told myself, Marilyn Monroe and aliens, there's no way this could be real, which I think is probably the way any of us would react if we were in his position the same way. But the majority of the content of this document, and I'm going to cover this whole document for you. That's not monstrous, but it basically focuses on, I wish I could say basically a few more times, right? I need to say basically about basically 100 times. I'm an idiot. Just follow along with me. It covers, it circles a conversation that was held, a telephone conversation between 2 people. One of them being Dorothy Kilgallen. Now, Dorothy Kilgallen was a gossip columnist back in the 50s and even in the 60s. And she was on the phone with an antique store owner named Howard Rothberg. Now, how that all got going. Now, it's so wild that Dorothy was even part of an FBI file herself. So not even like surrounding other things. But the Marilyn Monroe, this CIA document, like I said, it pops up in the early 90s. Now, what's funny is people claim that it was authenticated by the CIA itself, and the CIA didn't even know that they had done it. And it all took place that there was a fellow named Dr. Ronald Burleson, and he wrote the book UFOs and the Murder of Marilyn Monroe. And he had filed this appeal, of course, to the CIA because they had refused to release the transcripts of the wiretaps that had been made on Marilyn Monroe's phone. Now, how he found out about all this is anybody's guess, right? How he knew about these wiretaps. But he was looking into the wiretaps for August 3rd of 1962, okay? Well, it finally, of course, all this stuff goes down. No transcripts ever got released, but there was an acceptance of appeal on this process. And so when that happened, it, in a way, demonstrated that the document is an authentic CIA document. So it's saying, hey, look, we have them, we just can't release them. So right there, he's like, okay, I had a feeling they were real. And when I asked y'all for them and you didn't give them to me, then you're keeping them for a reason. It's not like, oh, that doesn't even exist. They're like, no, sorry, sir, we can't give that. Now, they should have, the CIA should have, of course, thinking quick on their feet, said, hey, there's no authenticity of this document. There's nothing. And just turn down the appeal. There's no reason to appeal it because it's not real. But of course, like we said, that's not what they did. And then, of course, the Freedom of Information Act comes along, and one thing leads to another. Now, with this Freedom of Information Act appeal and the acceptance of the appeal, it shows, they call it the Marilyn Memo, and it proves now that these transcripts of the wiretaps are not only real, but that they have them in their possession, but they're not going to release them. Now, if it was simply a phone call to friends or ex-lovers or ex-husbands or the housekeeper or anything like that, you should just release them, right? I mean, if somebody was trying to take your company emails or your personal emails, or had tapped your phone and you weren't doing anything wrong, you were just like, yeah, I mean, all I did is I called the mechanic and, I called Walmart and I made my grocery order so I could pull up and get it. And then I called the babysitter and that was about it. You'd be like, yeah, go ahead and take them. But obviously there's something on those transcripts that they don't want getting out. Now we can view it as ufology, or we could view it as a cover up from the U.S. government. Either way, it doesn't matter. But the August 3rd CIA document was written, just right there before her death, before, as we just discussed, maybe she was killed, maybe she, killed herself. We have no idea. But the story goes that the brothers had been giving a little sensitive information to Marilyn, right? And that she was writing what they said looked to be writing a whole lot of it down in her little diary. She called it her little diary of secrets, is what she said. And you think back then that was a big deal, with the diary. So you got to imagine they don't want that book getting out. They don't want any of this stuff getting out. But in this document, they are afraid that what Marilyn had written down was something that had been told to her about a visit by the president at a secret air base for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space. That's right. Now, they believe that the inference that came from JFK and that he had told Marilyn in private about him seeing these things and him being there. And when I say these things, they talk of alien bodies, the debris, the remains of the ship, all these things. Now, we already know that he was, he liked the ladies and that had got him in trouble in the past. So you could only imagine, okay, he would probably tell her all that, especially bragging. Guys are bad about that. We're horrible about that, but especially bragging about something like, you wouldn't believe what I know. You may be playing with one of, planning on marrying one of the Yankees or sleeping, but I know stuff about the UFO, and you see how all that stuff would break out. So we bump forward. We get into Dr. Burleson's book. We start talking about the fact that Marilyn was pulling back a little bit. She was like, and then the brothers really started breaking away. They were, she was causing a lot of trouble for them, a lot of trouble for the president. I mean, everybody's heard the song, the Happy Birthday song she sings. That's not saying like you would sing it to a friend. If you think it's no big deal, how would you like your wife singing it to one of your friends or your girlfriend or something, singing it like that? You're like, they just wouldn't go over so well the way she was singing that whole deal. So Dr. Burleson goes to looking into the fact that Marilyn indeed actually had these secrets and was going to tell people these secrets, that if she was going to break it off with the Kennedys, and when I say the Kennedys, I mean like all of them. I mean, maybe, the whole deal. It's believed that at the time the Attorney General was Robert Kennedy. It's believed at the time that Robert became very fearful of this and that this tell-all and all this would not just look bad on them for the affairs and such, but the world couldn't know about the UFO crash. They were like, look, man, y'all can't, it would be basically a meltdown of politics and homeland security and everything that we had just slowly started building as coming out of World War II would pretty much dissolve. You could imagine by the time we got to this point, by the time she told everybody. So, we're after the war, we have the crash, nobody knows about it, we're keeping it hidden. And then one loose-lipped president sleeping with one hot movie star and all of it unravels, which seems, if it's going to happen, it's going to take place here in America. I think I just described America, except for cheeseburgers and drugs. I think that would have been pretty much spot on. But that's what they were afraid of. So this wiretap conversation that, like I told you, that took place between Miss Kilgallen and her friend Howard Rothberg. There's also, some wiretaps, of course, now that we know that took place between Robert Kennedy and Marilyn. But in these wiretaps, Rothberg starts talking about some subjects with Kilgallen and the breakup with the Kennedys. And then he and Dorothy are talking about that she was attending to these Hollywood parties and that she was in these inner circles of the elite. And that's how people started noticing her. And then that she's saying, hey, look, I got some secrets that are going on that involve the attorney general. And this also involves the president. And then, Dorothy and them are talking about this secret, mentions that there was visits by the president to a secret air base, inspecting things for one sole purpose. And these things were from outer space. And in the wiretap, Dorothy goes on, or in the transcript, she goes on and says that she knew what might be the source of this visit. And that Dorothy says herself in the wiretap that she learned in the secret effort by the U.S. and the U.K. government that in the mid-50s to identify the origins of these crashed spacecraft on the planet, and also to try to identify these bodies, to try to study and understand these as best she could. Now, she believed, she was talking about this, Kilgallen. When I say she, I'm talking about Dorothy during this wiretap. She said, I'm under the belief that the story is from the 40s and it took place in New Mexico. And then she tells, the old fella again, or Rothberg or whatnot again, that if this is true, it would be a horrible, horrible embarrassment. And it would probably also blow NASA out of the water. Like, it would ruin that whole thing. So she's already, talking about this. Also, apparently it goes on with these wiretaps that Miss Monroe is said to have called the attorney general multiple times and was complaining that, my boyfriend's not talking to him anymore. I want you to talk to him. He's your brother. I want you to go talk to him. What are you going to do? And all this stuff's going on. So she's going wild about all that. Also, it's said that in these wiretaps and this is probably the nail in the coffin, that Miss Monroe was threatening to hold a press conference. And in this press conference, she was going to tell everything that she knew, everything that she'd been passed on to. Not just that, she even came out and said, not only am I going to tell all this and the fact that I've been, making time with him, but that I know of these bases in Cuba, and I know that our president, my man, plans to kill Castro. Now, you can only imagine how that would have gone over to the CIA, who's sitting there listening. You're like, okay, sweetheart. Look, you're in way over your head at this point. And that's where they got the name The Diary of Secrets, folks. She makes reference to it in the wiretap, is so it claims, and it goes in, and that she even goes on to say that she was going to send a bunch of that, her little red diary, to newspapers. She's like, I'll just start sending it out so everybody knows. Now, like I said, as you start going through this and you start thinking about this, you're like, now on this document, up in the top left of it, it says top secret. There's a stamp and there's an imprint on that. Well, when Mr. Burleson, like I told you, the author that wrote all this stuff, he enhances it. He puts it and gets some computer imaging, and he's going to enhance this little imprint. So it comes up and it turns out to contain the name of a Brigadier General George Shulgin. Now, Shulgin was the former chief UFO investigative coordinator there for the U.S. Air Force. So under that stamp, you can see it. So it didn't really get redacted out, didn't really get covered up, all of these things. This is actually called a bleed in, is what they call these when they come through underneath the stamp, things that pop up like this. So now you've got to imagine we have this CIA document. And on this CIA document, there are wiretap transcripts. And in those wiretap transcripts, is a woman threatening to expose all and tell. And like they said, I mean, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. If she's going down, she's bringing everybody with her. She's going out, shouting it to the hills. And then now you have on this document a brigadier general that people knew what he did and what he looked into, and his name is on it. Things start popping up. These CIA documents, people start looking like, wait a minute. Well, now it starts making this connection. These threads start weaving together of maybe she was killed. Maybe it was killed because of this UFO stuff. Maybe it was killed because, like we say, of the presidential stuff. We're not 100% still sure. of what this is, but we know it's kind of starting to come together. It's starting to congeal, if you will. Now, there's a lot more. Like I said, she kept calling and calling the Attorney General, mad that she was being ignored. She kept threatening to do all these things. Now, Dorothy Kilgallen, the one I told you that was wiretapped, and with this whole thing, she had actually written in a 1955 edition of the Los Angeles Examiner, come out in May of 23rd. Now, this is what she herself wrote. She wrote, British scientists and airmen, after examining the remains of one mysterious flying ship, are convinced these strange aerial objects are not optical illusions or Soviet inventions, but are flying saucers which originate on another planet. The source of my information is a British official of cabinet rank who prefers to remain unidentified. Now, of course, she's talking about this, British official, and she's even going on to write that this British official told her that we believe on the basis of our inquiry thus far that these saucers were staffed. This British official claims by small men and probably under 4 foot tall. Says it's frightening, but there are no denying the flying saucers come from another planet. Now, that's what she wrote in 1955. Now, you can imagine if she has British ties and this person's coming forward and telling her this, and she's being truthful with what she's receiving and where she's receiving it, it does seem to start lining up with the Roswell story, lining up with what people think. You start looking at it, you're like, okay, I can see this coming together. I can see how this is working together now. Everything seems to be braided, and we're getting that nice textile. We're working it out, that nice floor mat we're working on. Now, like any good conspiracy, there's always a problem, though, folks, with every little piece lining up the way it needs to in order for it to work out flawlessly. Now, we all know that. You could put together a puzzle, but if parts of those little corners were cut off, one side's a little bit bigger and all that, yeah, the puzzle might still fit, but it doesn't really look like it should. It doesn't really look like that puzzle. So that's what I'm going to point to one of my really good friends, Mr. Nick Redfern, because Nick points out some very obvious troubled spots in this conspiracy. Now, one of them, he says, is the vast majority of this story is reliant on this controversial document from the CIA I've just described to you, and its very questionable origins. And, of course, its very questionable authenticity. Now, like it's been alleged that this document was dated August 3rd of 1962, and what I talked to you about is the wiretaps and what it covers. But Nick points out one major thing that jumps out at him from this CIA document, and even points out specifically more or less of not what it says, but what it doesn't say. And he even goes on to talk about that there's not one single reference, no matter all the researchers, what all they've said, but Nick said none of this document references extraterrestrials, flying saucers, aliens, or UFOs. It's not written on this document anywhere. He said not one. He says, in fact, he said you could read the wording and actually turn it down a different path. You could take it for something else. And that something else, of course, he doesn't really allude to, but you could think that it could be something maybe more along the lines of communism, something more lines of, being in war with Cuba, little things along those lines of, say war, not getting along, let's say, putting an embargo on them, things along those. But Nick brings up who I brought up at the beginning of this little article. He brings up the man, Timothy Cooper. Now, there may be several out there that don't know who Timothy Cooper is, and then some of y'all probably know exactly who he is. He came into the mid, I almost hit basically, you hear me, folks? From the mid to late 90s. He's from California. He was a big part of ufology. Controversial, yes, of course, but it was over the fact that he had went on and made these claims that he had received a bunch of leaked documents from people that he knew that had retired and quit and stepped down from the intelligent community. And that the intelligence as far as, the military, CIA, FBI, any acronym you can think of, he claims he got a bunch of paperwork from them, that they had saved it all up. And when they stepped down, they just gave it all to him, which, okay, I have no clue. And there was a lot of these that talk about UFOs and the stuff that he came up with. But also, too, was the fellow that had a lot of paperwork that had to do with the Majestic 12 group. Now, a lot of those researchers believe that these documents, of course, were, like we just stated, 100% real. They're exactly what they state they are. Some of them, when I say them, some of them, I'm talking about the researchers, had gone on to believe, some were very, very loud voiced. I mean, they were very boisterous about this whole idea that they were government disinformation, that they had duped Mr. Cooper, and that the paperwork he had received had been simply received to get him to talk about things that weren't real and to throw them completely off the trail. And I think everybody listening to this podcast right now would probably be guilty of the same thing if you thought you were being handed something of that importance. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I would probably easily fall for it if I had someone show up from, I don't know, Department of Agriculture or the Fish and Game or anything like that, and go, hey, look, I got these documents, showing, we know Bigfoot's real and we know this is going on. And then they give it to you and you'd be like, oh, when in reality, it might be nothing more than disinformation, so I can see that, but there's a lot of it. But a lot of people too, when I say researchers, a lot of these other people, they believe that Tim created all of these documents himself, the whole thing. But Nick makes sure to point out whenever he's talked about this in his books that either way you believe, these documents are real. So it's not like it's just hearsay or story. These documents are real. You can find them online if you start looking for them. I mean, they're all out there. You can find the information. You can read it all yourself. It's a strange thing. So no matter where you stand on this strange side to a very tragically early death, one thing remains, folks, that something very strange happened to Miss Monroe. And I'm going to leave y'all with a few examples of this strangeness that surrounds her death. And I'm going to cover more of this on more of these conspiracies on these upcoming shows, because I'm fascinated with, I can't even say normal people, most conspiracy deaths that you have, whether it be a superstars and we're talking actors, actresses, sports, whatever. Any of this, most of the time, you may get a conspiracy, one or two. But for her, there's numerous links to different things. And it's kind of like the JFK conspiracy is as many different links as is to that. It's almost like Marilyn is thrown into it. But some of the strangeness is, you have to think about this. The police arrived about 4:30 in the morning to Marilyn's house. And when they get there, the housekeeper that we talked about, Miss Eunice, they claim in the police reports that Eunice is washing the sheets. That seems like an odd thing to do at 4:30 in the morning. It's also in the police reports that the last person that she was known to have spoken to on the phone was Peter Lawford, the President Kennedy at the time, his brother-in-law. So you're like, oh, that's a little odd too. They also know that the girlfriend of Marilyn Monroe's agent, her agent there in the movies, whatnot, the fellow was named Arthur Jacobs. And that Jacobs was told later that Monroe's overdose was around 10:30 p.m. This is coming from the girlfriend of Jacobs. I guess maybe she knew or he knew. I have no idea, but I'm guessing maybe he said something to the girlfriend, but that he had learned of her overdose at 10:30 that evening. But like I just told you, the police didn't get there till 4:30. So no medical help showed up for hours. Now the brother-in-law, Lawford, he claims that he'd been told by Marilyn Monroe's attorney that she was dead of an overdose around 1 a.m. But yet the police didn't arrive until 4:30, which, how would the attorney know? How would her agent know who's calling them and not calling the police first? This is the really strange things. Something that a lot of people didn't know, except the ones that were very close to Marilyn, is that she had a lot of trouble swallowing pills. Even like most people, you try to put the pill in your mouth, pour a lot of water in, all that stuff. She had some sort of issue with it. We've all known those people that can't do it. She had a real issue with being able to take these pills. And investigators in the scene report on the police report, the investigators found no water anywhere around the bed. There was no glass in the bedroom. They couldn't find any of that. In the toxicology reports, they said that they believe she had taken somewhere between 50 and 90 pills to get to the level that was found in her body, okay? So the amount of drugs that was in her body was enough to kill 10 people. And they said that it would have killed her long before she could have taken that many. So she couldn't have got that many in, especially if she's troubled. So you got to think, if you can't take one, how are you just going to pour bottles of pills in your mouth unless there's help being there? So the pathologist gets involved, and the pathologist goes to looking at Miss Monroe's organs and says this. He's like, the first thing that stood out was the fact that her organs and the state that they were in did not coincide with the taking of that many drugs. It just didn't. He said the coloration of her stomach and her intestines, everything was cool. Said there was also a lack of capsule in them. So that he's like, well, she didn't take these drugs orally. It just didn't happen. Now, her organs, of course, like any good conspiracy, were completely destroyed before they could be fully examined. Now, there were photographs of them, but somehow those got misplaced and was, of course, completed by another toxicologist. So it was just filled out and stamped good enough, and we'll just move on and bury this person that was just kind of caught in the line of fire. And like I told you too about Miss Eunice, she left the country, moved over to Europe to live out her days. Done. Had nothing more to do with any of this stuff after her brief interview, but had left. And there's been several witnesses, like we've talked about, girlfriends and such along the way that had heard things that constantly changed their stories. Some have even come forward later to say that they were told to change their stories, that what they had originally heard wasn't right, and they don't need to be spreading those type of stories. So any way you slice it, any way you look at this, whether you believe the CIA document that has wiretapped Miss Monroe's phone and the fact that she was trying to reach out numerous times to the president and to his brothers and was wanting some attention and wanting to maybe actually have a relationship. Who knows what was going on back then? Either way you believe, we know this, that a very beautiful woman who had a lot going on for her at the time, 36 years of age, died tragically, whether by her hand or someone else's. And there are so many threads and so many lines pointing to this that I don't think one conspiracy covers it all. I don't believe that she was killed because she knew about aliens. I don't believe she was killed because she knew only about Castro, or that she was killed because she was going to tear away from the brothers and expose all, so they sent the mafia to get her. I think there's a little bit of everything. I think if you take a little bit of each and combine that into the story, that we might actually have a good idea and a timeline of what actually happened in her final months of life. We go back and do all that. Now, like I said, there's a few more really good ones that I'm going to dig into. And after I get that book, I'm sure I'm going to dig into it. But this is just something that has always stuck with me of the fact of Marilyn Monroe, and then the idea of Roswell popping up. And Roswell really is kind of like the dead horse of the ufology world. Is it's been beaten and beaten till it doesn't even look like a horse anymore. It's basically the drum that everybody beats on, because that's where we started. It's the ufology's version of the Patterson-Gimlin film. Like, we don't know where to start, but this is the point we all agree to start on. Now, we should go earlier, but everybody seems to agree to start here. So it's just another one of those weird, twisted tales that ties Roswell into modern day folklore, modern day storytelling. And Miss Monroe seems to have gotten caught up with the wrong folks at the wrong time. maybe she did know too much. So let's take a quick break, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives.
And we are back, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said during the show, it was one of those things. There's a lot of stuff that you can hang your hat on. You can hang your hat on the CIA document, that's detailing these phone calls and the fact that Marilyn had to have known something. You can also hang your hat on the fact that it didn't happen because Tim Cooper made the whole thing up, that he's the guy that created all of these documents that was released and, all these things about the Majestic 12 and whatnot, that all this stuff was real or fake. There's a lot of things that you could go, swinging one way or the other. Needless to say, like I said on the outro coming out of it, there are a lot of odd things surrounding her death, whether she was killed, if you believe, because she knew too much about certain things, whether she was killed because the Kennedys were done with her and they knew she was going to go public and make it horrible for them and their families and bring a lot of poor light upon the presidency. I mean, we already know that JFK, as a young man when he was single as a senator, was a wild man. I mean, was a womanizer. These things are not unheard of. So the idea of a fellow with that kind of power being able to erase his mistakes is not an unheard of thing.
No, it's absolutely not. Especially, I mean, look at his own brother. The woman died in the car.
They're all everything that they're involved in is very, very strange. But like I said, I'm really curious in the fact that they had the mafia do it. That's always one of the theories, is that the mob, because the Kennedys were into the mob, that they had him or them take care of the problems. And then, of course, if you're a local police officer in Brentwood, California, and the president had somebody killed, and you were in there and you found some stuff about it, and then your big boss was like, "Oh, you think you did? You didn't see anything.
You didn't see nothing.
You need to shut up, and if you ever want to do anything outside of what you're doing now, you need to get back in your car and go back to work and forget you saw any of this stuff. And if you're asked, tell them you're not allowed to talk about it, or you didn't see anything." And that's all you tell them.
I believe that happens even to this day, but especially back then.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that the politicians and people like that could get away with way more than they can now.
I completely agree. 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things. It's a fascinating story. It's a shame that she had to die. It's a shame anybody gets murdered, or if, I personally do not believe that she killed herself. I believe she was killed over things that she was involved in. I don't know it's what she knew, whatever, but I believe she was killed over things she was involved in.
I 100% agree with you. It's very interesting.
It's a crazy story, folks. But yeah, there's more to it. I urge you to start, y'all look into some more of that stuff. So like we've covered already in the intro, Kyle has no baseball. Are the boys going on any crazy egg hunts? Anything going on this weekend or no?
Let me think. We're going over Delee's cousin's house, Ashley.
There you go.
For Easter. And I don't know. The big boys they're getting too big for that stuff, but I'm sure Luke and the other little ones will probably hide some eggs.
He's ready for something.
Don't forget, folks, if you want a good idea and you want to play a joke on some kids, since it's Easter, instead of putting like candy in some of the eggs, you should put like chores, things to do.
Oh, there you go.
Put in there like you have to give all the candy to Dad, because don't forget, Easter falls on April 1st.
Fools,
so you can pull a good prank if you want to.
That's right.
I always like to mess with the kids. It's fun.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. I have found out recently, and I mean literally 15 minutes before sitting down to record this show, that we're having a crawfish boil for Easter. So
at your house?
Not at my house, at one of my sister-in-law's houses.
Oh, word?
Yeah, so that's why. Of course, now look, I've got the hot water for the crawfish boil, although it did scald my whole right leg, something along those lines. But yeah, no, but I think that's what we've got planned. So that's really, I'm just looking forward till the following weekend so I can watch the UFC with Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov. So that's what my
do you want to give
a
prediction on that one?
Man, that's not yet. I will on the next show.
Okay.
We've talked about doing that, and everybody is asking about us sitting in here and watching one in studio and recording the ridiculousness. My only thing is I don't think anybody would want to hear that. I want to hear you and me talk about the fights drink and giggle and laugh. I think it would probably be boring for everyone except for me and Kyle, so that's the reason we haven't done it. I don't know how y'all listen to us now, so I'm pretty sure you wouldn't enjoy that. But if you would, we don't know. Crazier things have happened, so I don't know what we would do.
Right, and don't forget, if you want something good to listen to, don't forget about female criminals. You got to go over to parcast.com/criminals. That's Parcast, PARCAST.com/criminals. Or you can go to, like I said, iTunes, visit, Apple Podcast, TuneIn, Spotify.
I'm
Google
still not ready for
Play,
that.
or
I
whatever.
always say iTunes.
I do too, because
I
that's
can't
what
help
it's
it.
always been. It's just like, excuse me, when did the hashtag, it used to be the pound symbol.
Yes.
When did it change?
Yeah, don't give me the line.
It just
I have
all
no
of a
idea.
sudden, it was hashtag. I'm like, you mean pound symbol? They're like, no, it's hashtag.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
no,
no.
that's a pound symbol. Now listen here.
That's the pound sign. You're exactly right.
So, yeah, it's not iTunes anymore. Now it's Apple Podcasts. I guess because they added that category or something and started making it mandatory on your phones.
I guess so, yeah. I do like the fact how, while trying to be a professional and do this ad, that Kyle has to drop in a Three Amigos reference in the middle of doing
What are you
the
talking
ad.
about? What are you talking about?
Infamous, Kyle? Really?
Yeah, that means more than famous.
More than famous.
Doesn't it? Yeah, that's right. They're talking about the infamous El Guapo.
El
And he goes,
Guapo.
That means more than famous. I think Chevy Chase says that.
How great is that movie?
Three Amigos?
You think it's underrated? You think it got enough? I don't think it gets enough.
I love that one. It's one of the ones like I talk about.
Coming to America.
Coming to America. I have to always watch it. And Spies Like Us. I love Spies Like
Oh
Us.
yeah, my son. That may be one of his go-tos right there. Is Spies Like
It's
Us.
great. And what's
Doctor.
hard to believe is like Chevy Chase is so funny, but I heard in real life he's hard to deal with.
Yeah, I've
I've heard that.
I've heard people say about how much they hate him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole deal.
Like everybody.
Fletch is a great one too.
Yeah, right?
But yeah,
Dr. Rosen. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
yeah. I may have to actually go back now and watch Spies Like Us. Great, I know what I'll be doing till the wee hours of the evening is watching like Spies Like Us or
Yeah, go check it out if you haven't seen it. Also, don't forget, if you want to help out the show, you can write us a review on iTunes. That
That's right.
always helps. Don't forget about Expanded Perspectives Elite. You can go to that. You can sign up by going to the website, expandedperspectives.com, clicking on the Elite tab. And for $5 a month, you have access to every Elite show we've ever done. What an incredible bargain, as well as an extra episode every week or so. And also, if you want to send a story of your own to us, you can email the show at expandedperspectives@yahoo.com, or you can call the show 817-945-3828. I hope everybody out there has a great week of work. Have a good Easter, folks. Till next time, I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale.
Peace, y'all.